Constantine Brancusi, the Romanian sculptor shown in his studio here in this photograph taken in the 1920s, was the most daring force in modernist sculpture around 1910 to 1920. But he's also one of the most misunderstood artists from this time period. Most commentators talk about his style, emphasizing the radical reduction of forms to the simplest of contours. This is true enough, as you can see if you Google Brancusi sculpture MoMA. The sculptures are famous for presenting pared down forms, whittled down to what is often called the essence of a form. The question is, what are we to make of this radical simplicity? It's often claimed that Brancusi's smooth, simple objects express serenity.
That embryonic sort of egg shape. It's an extraordinary object that really communicates an incredible depth of serenity and thoughtfulness.
One reason she's wrong is that people who saw Brancusi's sculptures in the 1910s and 20s did not find them serene. They used different language. One critic wrote in 1913 that Brancusi's sculptures were, quote, disturbing, so disturbing that they altered the attitude of a great many New Yorkers toward a whole branch of art. This was a moment when Brancusi's sculptures had been exhibited in New York. The idea is people are looking at the entire branch of art known as sculpture differently because what Brancusi is doing is so disturbing to their expectations. It was disturbing that he was reducing human figures to fragments, an approach he developed in 1906 to 07 with his series of cast bronze heads titled The Sleeping Infant. The head becomes the part separated from the whole body in a way that had never happened before in sculpture. Brancusi took that idea of the fragment, the severed head, and pursued it in an entire series using different materials. So we see it in marble and plaster casts as well as in bronze. And then we see it evolve into the newborn, a version of it that becomes much more like a simplified form of an egg or an embryo, and now is perhaps not sleeping because it has the mouth form in an enormous cry. Brancusi took the same idea of the floating separated head, the fragment, and took it to make what he called the Sleeping Muse series, which was another disturbing aspect of his sculpture, that he's working in series, making the same form over and over with slight variations in different materials, as if he's putting on display a process of experimentation, as if revealing that he's figuring out his process. He's revealing meaning in new ways. He's discovering meanings by changing the materials. One of the most disturbing features of Brancusi's sculpture is that these fragments do not have pedestals. When they are usually displayed the way he wants them to be displayed, they are simply placed on the floor in the ordinary space. This was unheard of in sculpture. Even Rodin, who had experimented with the possibility of the fragment and who had reduced the pedestal dramatically, never would have thought to eliminate it, since the pedestal in sculpture is what separates the world of the sculptural reality from the real world around it. It's what allows the sculpture to be in a space apart, its own space and time, in the kind of idealized realm of art. When Brancusi presents his Sleeping Muse without a pedestal, he dissolves the boundary between art and. So one of the works in the collection of the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art is this Brancusi titled Blonde Negress. And it plays off of the golden polished surface of what is like a head with a hairstyle on top. And then the the black polish of the deep, lustrous darkness of the stone against a different white stone. Contrasting materials, and then the surface is so high polished that this photograph is very helpful. It shows how the light is reflecting off of it, and someone who is a viewer is reflecting in it as well. You confront this sculpture and see your own reflection, and you see the contingent shifting world around you. So sculpture is traditionally associated with solidity and permanence, especially when made out of stone or bronze. But here we have a surface that actually embraces changing light conditions, changing reflections, illusionistic variation. Brancusi, of course, uses that high polish also on many of the versions of torso of a young man, where you can also see your reflection and the surface seems to shift and change. And then he also does it in wood, where the entire experience is different, as if he's suggesting sculpture is the play of uncertainty and discovery out of materials interacting with each other and with the environment, rather than some permanent ideal reality. But of course, also one of the things he's doing with the fragments and with these reflections is he's heightening an eroticism. It's an eroticism that's based in form and materials. So famously, the torso of a young man evokes a phallus. Most famously, Brancusi's sculpture that you see here titled Princess X is a kind of strange version of a supposedly simple form that's actually imbued with erotic energy. When Matisse saw this, he said, "Why, it's a phallus," which it seems pretty obvious that it's a phallus. At the same time, the claim made by the artist and others is that, well, Princess X is a woman whose head is gazing down at her bosom. Really, the erotic charge has to do with the play between the two. And I want to emphasize that here is where the reflection in the surface means that the viewer is implicated in the erotic gazing. We see ourselves projected, right? We see gazing as an act of projection. And we see this play between what we're seeing on the surface, what we're seeing as form, how we're relating to the space it inhabits, which is also the space we inhabit. That's how Brancusi is breaking down the division between art and life.